We got David George in the studio. Welcome to the stream, David. How you doing? Welcome
Let's
to the
go.
stream.
Let's go.
How you doing? We're trying to keep the energy up. It's a big day.
I love it.
Great to
so
see
much.
you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for coming
Yeah,
on.
I love it.
I would love for you to break down how the growth fund actually works. Andreessen's known for these specialized funds, but then I know that the growth fund cuts across all of them and you see deals all over the place. Do I have that even roughly correct? How do you think about supporting the companies in the portfolio that maybe get picked up at the earlier stage?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, fun to be on here with you guys. Big fan.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, you have it right. So we have 7 different funds. I think if you talk to some of our early stage folks, they're very domain focused. And that means, they know the products, they know the markets, they know the technologies at a very deep level. And then the growth fund where we sit is kind of across all of those. So, ideally the way it works is, we can work hand in hand with them and take kind of the best of the best ideas from each of those sectors and then invest, stage specific at the growth fund. And so what we do, probably half our effort in dollars historically have been follow-ons, supporting existing portfolio companies. And that's worked great. There's something we talk about all the time, which is game film. And there's no better way to have game film than to, have my partner having done the Series A and Databricks. And then, we get to see it all along. With that comes access, relationships with the founders, all that stuff helps. But then, the other half of what we do is invest in net new companies that were not, previously investments in A16Z for whatever reason. And so, we started this in 2019. I had a big list when I joined. I'm like, all right, I know the 6 existing portfolio companies that I want to go try and create a new deal in. And then I knew a bunch of the ones that I wanted to invest in outside the portfolio. And we've been fortunate to have some success. We've invested in outside companies like Roblox and Figma and SpaceX and Waymo, and then, obviously a lot of success doubling and tripling and quadrupling down with existing companies.
Well, it's a great time to tell everyone that TBPN is sponsored by Figma. So thank you for the shout out. This is a one hand washes the other moment. Put some dollars in your pocket, put some dollars in our pocket.
That was didn't you do that deal in April of 2020 or it got announced back then? That was a crazy moment in history.
Congratulations.
I got a lot of stories about that one, man. But we had been courting. I remember I met Peter Levine when I was right at the tail end of figuring out whether I was going to join, and he was like, "We need a growth fund." I'm like, "Okay." I was going to tell you that. And he's like, we got to invest in this company Figma. It's crazy that we're not investors in this thing. It really pisses me off. All right, well, we can go fix that. And so, awesome. I joined and we courted Dylan for a year and a half. And then, COVID hits. We all think the world is going to melt. We'd been trying to convince Dylan to do an investment with us. And the world's falling apart. And he calls us and he's like, "I'll do a deal now." And I'm like, "Oh God."
Art of the deal, Dylan Field.
Legend.
Absolute dog.
This is brutal.
Put you on the spot.
I know it was, but it was great. Obviously we're thrilled to be his partners. That one was funny because we, if you take a traditional growth investing lens and look at a company like Figma at that stage, you could look at a spreadsheet and look at market reports on market size it, and what you'd see is well, there's not that many designers, and sure, the number of designers is growing, but how compelling is that going to be? And if we didn't have depth of product and technology and market insights, we would have missed the obvious thing, which is it's not just a design tool. It's a tool for designers plus front end engineers, and that functionality is all merging together. And the proportion of designers is massively growing relative to engineers, and there's even going to be business uses. And so, Figma is an awesome one. It's a great example of a company where traditional lens would probably miss it for what it could be. But it's sort of it's one of these things we call them model busters. It's you do a little spreadsheet model, and it show these numbers, and it turns out it's all wrong. The market size is totally wrong, and it could just totally exceed it. So that's a great one.
Can you talk about
when it breaks
the
model
busters, the aperture of growth equity deals? obviously the traditional growth round is post product market fit. Maybe, you're up in the 50 million plus raised range, but we're seeing these crazy deals get done with pre-revenue, pre-product AI companies raising hundreds of millions of dollars. Are you putting that in the growth bucket, and are you changing the way your team thinks about deals to set yourself up for looking at those bigger but earlier stage deals? Or are you trying to think about how can we fit those into a venture portfolio or venture fund?
Yeah, let me just talk to you about like the buckets of stuff we do.
Please.
And so, there's a big bucket of stuff that we do, which is, traditional high flying growth equity companies. And so a bunch of the companies that I listed would fit that. Databricks, Roblox.
And those are like mature businesses. Like you can do a DCF on them. You can do market multiples. Like you can do real work, but yeah.
Yeah. So that's one bucket. And I'll talk more about those. But I would say my observation from, doing growth investing for the last 15 years or so is, there's a bunch of instances of those that like end up being way bigger and better businesses than anybody would have thought.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't be surprising, because if you just look at like the composition of the biggest and most important companies in the world, they're all tech companies, and their market caps have sort of extended beyond anyone's idea of what they could be, both because they exceeded market size estimates and also they came up with new products. And so there's both flavors of those when we talk about model busters. But that's one class of things that we're doing. In the AI world, there's another class of things that we're doing, which is like, it slaps you in the face that it's working. Like these are the fastest growing companies that we've ever seen. Like we're investors in a bunch of the fastest growing companies of the previous generation, like Wiz and Slack and Deal. And if you put them on a chart with companies like, Cursor or 11 Labs or XAI, like they get to that 100 million stage way, way, way faster than that previous generation of company. So that's a bucket, and there's not like hundreds of those yet, but I think there will be hundreds of those as the AI applications come, because the groundwork's being laid for that. Then you asked about the sort of kind of earlier stage kind of companies that raise a lot of dough. We do those, but we keep an extraordinarily high bar. So we're investors in companies like SSI that are working on really exciting new things with the best talent in the world. That was part of our thesis in investing in character AI, is backing Noam Shazir, and you kind of squint and say, okay, this is a person that we can back, and we know that he's going to create something special. So those are
transformative. So it's pretty. He's on the
founder
paper.
bet, but you can really go risk on.
Yeah.
I have a question for you around kind of modeling market sizing in this AI era. Everybody likes to say there's an opportunity for software to basically get paid for end work. So instead of creating, let's say, software for accountants, you can create software that does accounting services, right? And the TAM expansion there of these end markets for that look maybe more like payroll spend or services spend. It starts to get really exciting, because they go from, hey, this is $100 billion market to this is, could be a multi-trillion-dollar market around labor. The question that I've been personally kind of wrestling with is, if software solutions are delivering services, maybe there's a short period where you can capture, a huge amount of that, spend, but over time, those opportunities, there will be other software providers that are, competing to do that services work, and won't that have like some type of deflationary effect? And overall, maybe markets aren't getting smaller, but maybe prices can't stay as high as they are in a sort of human-led, service market. So what are your high level, how are you thinking about market sizing given, and I don't expect you to have like a perfect answer here, because again, a lot of these companies are model breakers, as you described.
The model busters, man.
Model busters.
The busters. So yeah, I love this topic, because it's the fun one that everyone is debating right now, is like, well, we can go capture labor. And without like a super deeply developed and astute strategy, like that's just not going to happen. And so, if you look at like some of the biggest technology breakthroughs of all time, the way that those get priced isn't the replacement of what they're delivering.
Yeah.
Competitive forces come in and actually like there's return on capital, there's like, different competitive positioning, and often that gets competed away. So my rule of thumb is when you have these major technology waves, just assume that 90% plus of the surplus is going to be on the consumer or customer side. And that's great because you can still, like, if they work, when they work, you can still create incredible businesses out of it. So, if you take the previous wave of technology change, what would you or I, or probably any average American person pay for an iPhone? Like a lot more than $1,000.
Yeah, like 10K. Probably.
Yeah, like a lot more than
100K,
$1,000.
100K.
We've captured like 90% of the surplus, and it still turns out that Apple has an amazing business on the back of it.
Yeah,
interesting.
So technology can be kind of magical in that way. In the previous cycle, if you just take iPhone and cloud computing, those things together created like 10 trillion of new market cap across internet, software, mega cap tech. Now, a lot of that got captured by the large tech companies, but a ton of it went to new companies as well. And so my simple framework for AI right now is the more disruptive the technology itself actually is, and the more potentially disruptive the business model, the more that favors the startup, and the less that favors the incumbent. So like, what was the mobile version of Salesforce.com?
Salesforce.com.
But if Salesforce.com, if that technology wave, instead of being just, hey, access Salesforce on your mobile device, if instead it was like, hey, we have completely new workflow, we have a completely new interface, a completely new database, and oh, by the way, a totally different business model, maybe you'd have a startup.
Positioned. Yeah, that makes sense. We're talking to David Ulovich next. How does growth underwriting work in defense tech or hard tech or American dynamism? I imagine it's different because there's more debt, there's more CapEx, it's a slightly different business, not zero marginal cost necessarily. How are you thinking about underwriting the hard tech boom?
This is a great question, and one that we sit around and talk about all the time. So our lives are a lot easier because we have an amazing early stage American dynamism practice. And so we see a lot of things. We're on the cutting edge of the trends. We have the right networks. My simple rule on that is you can create venture scale, amazing outcomes that are even better than the software only businesses, but they're probably going to be fewer and further between. Like they're very, very hard to pull off. So, we saw this at, not quite the degree of difficulty as others, but still quite a hard one at Samsara, which is one of our portfolio companies, which was one of the first companies that was sort of a modern hardware plus software public company. And they've demonstrated that they can create an incredible business out of it. Right now, the four that I always go to that I talk about that are the sort of champions that I always reference are Anduril, SpaceX, Flock Safety, and Waymo. These are four of our biggest portfolio companies that we've led a bunch of rounds in, and in some cases are some of the largest shareholders. In the case of Anduril, it's a model buster because they have made multiple products work, and they now have trust. And that's an even more defensible position than a software company could ever be in. So there's $700 billion of defense market cap for them to go get. And I think they'll go get a lot of it, and they might create new market cap too. SpaceX has one of the best competitive positions of any company of all time. I mean, it's like the British East India Company of space. It's incredible. They have, yeah, I love it. They have like 20x relative market share. Like that doesn't happen anywhere. And then, Flock is doing some crazy stuff. I always say it has the craziest ROI of any company we invest in because it's like we stopped kidnappings, like, recovered lost kids.
Yeah, it's crazy.
They solve like greater than 10% of all crime in the United States today. That's just incredible. And then, Waymo is the last one, which is, super exciting. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of R&D and invested capital and difficulty in building that company. But it's a magical experience. Like I took my family from Kentucky in Waymo's this weekend, and they were like, "Oh my God!" They were very nervous, and then they were like, "Okay, this is a better driver than you." And so
That's awesome.
it's super exciting. It's growing really fast. But yeah, the simple thing for me is like they can be better businesses, but they're much harder to pull off.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to kick it over
This
to
was
DU.
amazing.
This was great.
Really
We'd love to have
enjoyed
you
it.
back and talk more. Have a
Thanks,
good
guys.
one.
See ya.
Bye.
Cheers.